Okay. So just try and be aware of the only part of your body that you're touching the world with. So your feet. So imagine you were like really starving, hungry, and then you suddenly came to a table with food. I mean, you wouldn't think, your arms would just reach out and you'd start cramming it into your mouth. So you just needed that food inside you. There's this real hunger. So that's how we should feel in relation to the ground. Rather than it being something down there that I'm pushing myself up here from, it's something I'm trying to pull myself down to really like get your feet in the mud, you know, get dirty, get down to earth. So this sense that your legs are pulling you down as much as they're pushing you up. Yeah. And if you came across that table with food, so what would be the action of your arms? You'd reach out with open hand, you'd clasp a piece of food and you'd pull it in to your mouth. So you'd be doing this, you'd be opening, closing. And as you closed, that would be bringing the food towards you. Yeah. So it's exactly the same with the feet. They're opening and closing all the time. There's this sort of heaving, breathing going on. So it's like breathing, because as you extend your toes, you're sending something out from your body. And as you clench your toes, you're pulling something into the foot. So that's what we want to sort of just really feel in relation to the ground. If you've got a carpet underneath your feet that's got texture, then you can sort of really enjoy that texture. I've just got these flat, shiny tiles, which are a bit useless. The best place is the beach, you know, where you've got the sand or the pebbles, the gravel, and you can just really rummage your toes around in it. So we want to see the ground as something to interact with, something to bring into me, something to send something of me out into, rather than simply something to raise myself up from. So just feel how gravity is pulling you down. So that's inevitable. You can't get away from that. You are pushing yourself up against that. So the force of gravity is passive. You just got to accept it. This force coming up is active, but it's only a little bit active if you're not really moving, if you're just staying still. So we want to introduce another force, which is me pulling myself down, that's even more active than that active force of me pushing myself up. So I've got this sinking of gravity, I've got the pushing against that, and then I've got this action of my feet that's pulling me down. Yeah? So let's just try it. So just feel gravity pulling. And just slowly just relax the legs a little bit and let it pull you down. Yeah. So you can feel this expanding as the knees are pressed out, like your horse is getting fatter. And then just start, feel the heels and just squeeze them into the ground. And let that slowly bring you up against that. And then again, just slowly relax and let gravity take you down. And then you've got this squeezing, extending from the heels, going down, almost like the toes are coming off the ground a little bit because you're really just pushing the heels down. And then slowly just relax and let gravity take you. And then just squeezing the heels down, trying not to tighten up around here. So keep that open. Yeah, so this is, if you like, our first difficulty, is how do we push up against gravity without fighting it? Yeah. So this is squeezing the muscles. So it's like I'm squeezing the muscles around the bone rather than just tightening a muscle to make a lever move. So I'm oozing something out of my heels and into the ground, and that is causing me to rise. So my rising is really almost like a passive response to my squeezing down, pressing down into the earth. And now just relax that and let gravity pull you down. And then again, ooh. So the important thing is that when you squeeze to come up, your mind is with the injection down into the ground. It's not with the coming up. The coming up is almost like a byproduct. So I just squeeze. So what you do, you just imagine you're sort of getting heavier and heavier. So it gets more and more difficult to press yourself up. Ugh. And it gets more and more difficult to sort of passively control this. Yeah, so here you're working really hard to press yourself up. Now you just allow that intensity of that hard work to come into this. So it starts to become you pulling yourself down. Yeah, so through the repetitive practice, we're wanting to soften and relax, but also to get the spirit to intensify. Yeah, so the effort becomes more. So here I'm really pressing up. I just keep that. I now bring it up a level. If I bring it down a level, then I'll just relax and let gravity take me down. Now I want to bring it up a level. So that really expands my toes. And then I just clench the toes and just pull myself down. And now here, this is almost like the relaxation phase in comparison. And then this is really like an animal. Like you're just trying to rouse something inside you that will enable you to hunt and kill. Press. This is getting you into a position where you can crouch. So here you're really pulling yourself down. It's not just pulling your body closer to the ground. You're pulling energy out of the ground and into yourself. So you're charging yourself up here. So the heels press down, the toes expand and extend out. And then I just rock onto the front of the foot slightly and use the toes to clench the ground to pull me down. So here you're really like a coiled up spring. If you let go of the tension, you'd just bound up, you'd spring upwards. It's here you've really pulled yourself down against that push up. Yeah, so you're just wanting your toes to do the same as your hands, as your fingers. So as your fingers expand here, so should the toes. And then pull them down. And really feel the little toes and the little fingers, because they're really the ones that are active most. Okay, so let's just come back to riding horse. So just feel those three levels present as we stand motionless. So you've got the drawdown, which is gravity just pulling you. You've got your driving down with the heels to balance that so that you don't move down. And you've also got this almost like a crouching feel, like you're bringing that ground up into you. into here. It's very much like the, the shape of riding horse, where we're embracing something with the arms and the legs. So that embracing feeling should actually be taking us down and getting this to relate to the earth beneath us. Yeah, so to become our normal sort of mind-centered selves, self-centered, egocentric selves, we need to break the connection with the ground. So in other words, we need to stop wanting to pull ourselves down to it. Because when we break that, then we can just come into this and separate from the world beneath us, separate from natural forces, if you like, from gravity. So that's the main thing that we need to start to quieten this in a natural way, rather than just sitting, meditating and forcing it to become quiet. It becomes quiet because it has to be quiet. Otherwise you just wouldn't hear what's around you. You wouldn't be attentive to your environment. That's the sort of quiet we want. The quiet that a warrior fighter needs, rather than the quiet that a meditator needs. If a fighter is thinking to himself, he's going to be dead, because he's not going to see the blow when it comes. Yeah. So he needs to be constantly vigilant. That's what we want. And what gives it to us is this feeling of pulling ourselves down, not the feeling of letting yourself. I mean, that you have to let yourself down in order to get to that level of energy where you can then pull yourself down. So now let's just pull and expand. So this is a bit like pulling yourself down. It's really just withdrawing into the dantian, curling up the dantian. So you can see that, when you do this and concentrate on the feet, then it just becomes what we've just been doing beforehand, pulling ourselves down. Okay, and then back to here. Okay, so now let's just, yes, it's almost like you're just doing the same exercise, this, but you're just pulling one side, and that will just make you turn. Yeah. So again, it's just it's from the feet and the fingers. So these toes are reaching, and then these toes are clenching, and these toes are reaching as the other ones clench. So it's just the same exercise, but just sort of alternating. Wow. And really work with the ground. So really push the ground with the legs, the feet, in order to force this turn. Yes, it's like the waist is turning against the legs. So the legs are trying to turn you one way, and your waist is pushing against that. So you're creating a resistance to your own movement using your body, just to generate the intensity required to extend your toes and fingers. It's like internal pressure just trying to burst out. You want this feeling that the toes and the fingers really have to expand, just to release some of that pressure. Okay. And now let's just try something gentle. Yeah, so just feel the energy breathing. And just feel, as soon as you sort of get into something like this, you lose the ground. So if you just try and remain attentive to the ground, to that feeling on the sole of your foot that's touching the earth, then it will stop what you're doing becoming too sort of indulgent and airy-fairy. It's like attending to the anchor. Or what what the Japanese, the samurai would say is that you're just ready to die at any moment, because you're already in the earth, if you like. Yeah, so remember, the hands and the feet are basically the same. So what's happening here between the hands, it's also happening between the feet, just beneath the surface of the earth. So just try and be aware of that. You're using the hands to sort of wake up the feet, and then you're using the feet like an anchor to stop yourself getting too carried away with the arms, with the hands, with the energy that you're generating. You don't want to indulge in it. So here it's like the soles of the feet, outside edges cutting in. So the soles of the feet are sort of trying to look at each other under the ground. And then the knees collapse in a little bit and the outside edges go out. Yeah? And then here. So just feel the soles of the feet. So here they're trying to look at each other. So you're really coming onto the outside edges, instep coming up. And then they just flatten out really. Ooh. Yeah, see how everything becomes the same. Okay. So now just back to riding horse. Yeah, we're so used to, it's like pushing the head above the clouds so that we can think clearly. That's the way we normally use the legs. So we push up, you can just feel it. As soon as you come back to stillness, the legs are pushing you up so that you can start thinking. You think you're coming to stillness here, but you're not. You're coming to some sort of some feeling of your own sort of center. When you're down here rummaging with the earth, then there are no thoughts because you're busy with something else. So as soon as you stop being busy with, in our case here, the ground we're standing on, instead we become busy with ourselves. Even if we produce complete stillness here, we're still self-centered. Yeah, so this is what's so really difficult. There needs to be, you need to have that feeling of sort of pumping with the ground, working with the ground, fucking the ground, really. It's sexual energy, basically. Yeah. So you're just heaving like this, and that's producing this sort of quietness here that instead of the normal noise, it fills with like a burning intensity that just wants to fire out and just hunt and fight. And so we don't stop thinking so that we can start thinking again. It's not just a sort of luxury. It's not just a stillness that we sort of use as a respite from our normal shitty chatter in order to then come back to our shitty chatter. It's something completely different. It's a different order, a different intensity. So, when you watch those MMA fighters, which I sometimes do, you're in the ring, and there they are beforehand, and they're all sort of, they've psyched themselves up for months. And then after the fight, they just, it's like they've seen a ghost. Yeah. They've just gone through something with such intensity we cannot imagine. And so you've just got this pulling connection to everything. And so when you look at something, you look at something. So normally when we look at something, we don't realize it, but we basically put pressure on it. So we're pushing it away. Because when we look at things, we're naming them and we're judging them. Yeah. So I look at that and say, it's a table. And there's something in me, that very act of observation is it's almost like I'm saying, there's the table over there. Yeah. So what we want is this feeling of these hungry eyes, rather than clear eyes, rather than judging eyes. Yeah. Because as soon as you look at something with that sort of false quiet mind, you lose connection with the thing and you just take on board its name, its signifier. Yeah. It's a strange process. It's like bird watchers, they're going out and they're seeing a bird and they're ticking it off, and then they don't worry about those birds anymore because they've seen that one, and then they go, well, can we find another one? So it's like collecting trophies, yeah, in order to give yourself a sense of achievement and a sense of authority, all this shit we're trying to let go of. Okay. So now let's just, yesterday we started working on the figures of eights. So let's just try a bit today and just try and get it a bit different. So just going around the waist, but you're sort of using the hand to help you. So it's very similar to how we were doing, when we were doing this before. Yeah. So yesterday we were sort of tracing the figures of eights and feeling it more like an artist who's drawing a line with a pencil. Yeah. And just seeing that line, using the mind to draw the line, to pull it, to draw it. Yeah. So that's the way we worked yesterday. So now just working a bit more meaty and from the ground. So just pulling around, almost like you are just pulling a piece of elastic out of here, and it springs back into the belly and then here. So much more physically. Yeah, again, with that feeling of fighting. Yeah, so your legs are trying to prevent you from moving, and your waist is insisting, is pulling. Yeah, so we need these two contrary forces, otherwise there's no elasticity. And it's this elastic quality that's so rejuvenating and healthy and Taoist. Yeah. So it's like it's like there's like a piece of elastic around my waist that's in the shape of a figure of eight. So it comes into my down chin and out of my min neng and around here, and then out of here and around here. Yeah. So it's like we just catch it from the min neng and just stretch it around. It springs into the front. Yeah. So we're sort of expanding out of the min meng and collapsing and gathering into the dan chin. And what you want to do is like just quickly catch it and then just stop seeing it and just get into it. So you're really in the thick of this exercise, and it's swirling all around you. You don't have the luxury of this sort of head-on high that's seeing it and tracing it. You're just in it, yeah? And it's... So again, it's coming from the ground. It's coming from your relationship with the ground. So around this... So it's like you have a really meaty belt, like a really thick, wide belt made of this really tough elastic. And then just feel it coming from the ground. Yeah, so it's like your hand reaches under the foot and up. So you've just become really squat in order to take this belt sort of down to the ground. So you've become all waist. That's the idea. So the waist is like a corset of muscle, quite wide, that wraps around like a cummerbund, that wraps around and sort of joins your upper and lower body together. Like one of those weights belts that they wear to protect their back when they do deadlifts and squats. Okay, now let's just get it quieter. So more like a formal figure of eight. Yeah. So just make sure you get down to the feet. Yeah, so remember when we started doing the figures of eights, and John was just very strict and insistent that we get the bottom of the figure of eight, the bottom, so the figure of eight is just two circles really sitting on top of each other. So the temptation is to do a really big top circle and then just let the hand flick round to the bottom circle. And he was always saying it should be the other way around. So you've got a relatively small top circle and then your bottom circle gets all the way down to the ground. Like a snowman, you know, a snowman's normally like a big snowball with a smaller snowball on top. Yeah, so you're really reaching down under the foot here. Yeah, so let's just try the one. Just really feel it. So how does it feel at the top? And how does it feel at the bottom? What's the psychology? So here there's like a brightness, almost like your eyebrows lift up. And then here it's almost like you become really serious, really deep in the Dan Shen. And then here something can lighten up and come up into the heart. So it's the bottom bit we don't really like. That's the bit we tend to sort of neglect. So it's this serious bit, the deathly serious bit. So, so something in me has got to really just relax and be willing to go into the ground, to be willing to die, basically. To just let go and just melt down. And then out of that, something can blossom, if you like. So it's like the top of the figure of eight is like a sort of the top of the tree. Okay, let's try a little bit with this one. Yeah, so what we're trying to do really is to stop seeing it and become it. Yeah, so here, I'm with that figure of 8. Here I'm just enjoying that moment. Yeah? Be like the sun at midday. Yeah? So the sun at midday knows it's going to set. It's now declined. So at the top, you're at your peak, but you're about to fall. And then here, even though it's gloomy and difficult, you know it's going to come up. So you're just with that. You're with the process. Yeah, so when you can get into it and become it, then the figure of 8 starts developing all these sort of higher frequencies that we've normally smoothed out with our modern living, with our comforts and the ease with which we live. And so when you just get into this, it's like it has all this sort of detail that's sprouting out of it. Like this, densely feathered wing that's just squeezing out of your shoulder blade and getting involved. Okay, let's just come back to both. Yeah, so it's like you're sort of disappearing into yourself and just sprouting all this plumage, all these sort of feathers that you didn't realize you had. And of course, you don't normally. Okay. So let's just bring it back. Okay, so now let's just get figures of eights in the hands. Yeah, so which finger is it that wants to sort of dominate, that wants to lead? So in Tai Chi, it's the middle finger. So the middle finger is the finger about which your hand rotates. Yeah. So it's basically the dominant finger. It's the ruler. And the other fingers are sort of separated from it and just sort of following. Okay, now just switch into the little finger. So just feel as though it's your little finger that's sort of leading. Yeah. And that will also take you into the little toes. Whoa. And then the ring finger. You just feel that. You just have the mind in it. Feel as though that's the finger that's sort of leading. It's the energy coming out of that finger that's going along the figure of eight. And again, with the foot, like the toe we intend to neglect, the one next to the little toe. And then the index finger. Yeah, so this one's relatively easy because we point, so we're very used to using the index finger. But just try and relax it and just feel its humor. Just feel the delicacy in it rather than, rather than it simply being indicative of a mind that's pointing. Oh, yeah. And then just the thumbs. Thumbs are a bit weird. And the thumb is more like the heel of the foot rather than the big toe. So you can feel as though your heels are trying to do the same as what your thumbs are doing. Okay, let's just come back to here a sec. Just feel the hands. You've got all these 5 fingers 10 fingers, and they're all separate and they've all got their own activity, their own frequency, if you like. So your hand is incredibly rich. It's not just a thing that goes round. It's not like a paddle. It's got these 5 things all wanting to express themselves. Yeah, so that's the first stage to sort of waking up this sort of Baroque detail. The feathers, if you like, the feathers on the wing, is to sort of separate the fingers by just working on them individually, just a little bit. And then the hand can just relax into its components rather than be tensely held together. I can imagine a piano player. That's just got, each finger has this degree of independence, just how their hands must feel. You can see them, you know, when they're just not playing the piano, just got their hands hanging. You can tell that those fingers know a thing or two. Apparently when Chopin composed, you're meant to play his pieces with the correct fingering because he realized that each finger produced a different emotion when it plays, yeah? So he wrote with that in mind. So there's this, you know, incredible richness, which is very apparent in his writing. Okay, and now let's just go do the figure of 8 again, but with that feeling of that all the fingers are sort of separate and they're all sort of dancing at different frequencies around this figure of 8. The middle finger tends to be the leader, but not so much in a dominant way. It's like the sort of the nanny taking the children to the park to play. The children are all just full of joy and delight and running around, and the nanny's there just looking after them. That's like the middle finger. And then the other fingers can sort of swirl around it and produce all this detail that we're wanting. So if you like, your mind is with the middle finger and your energy is with the other fingers. That's the feeling. Yeah, you can feel how they just feel the different fingers. So if you can get the little finger, you suddenly become sexy. Yeah, ooh. You suddenly become all sort of coy and sort of teasing, seductive. Ooh. And then we want the same thing in the feet. So always bringing it back to the feet. We want the hands to teach the feet. The hands to wake up the feet. So you've got this is trying to happen in the toes. And you can just play with it. A bit like you're just dancing freely. Yeah, so this is like one step up from just the hand. You've got the hand, which is like that one thing, and you've got the fingers, which, so the 1 becomes 5. Yeah. And then you can it just goes up from there, basically. You can consider each joint in the finger and feel them all sort of dancing around. And you just get this immense richness in the energy. It always brings to mind to me, those sort of really sort of primitive tribes people, primitive in a good way, and they sort of dress up. They make all these beautiful costumes from like bird feathers and moss and stuff, and just give them this equipage that's just so beautiful and just so natural, like the headdress of the sort of the Red Indian. Yeah, and it all starts for me with not wearing shoes. One of my students sent me a little sort of YouTube movie about going barefoot, which I've seen before years ago. And the guy in it was saying how he went to visit some Indians in a teepee, and as he entered, the lady Indian, the mother, she just said, "Take off your shoes; they make you sick." And they do, because they insulate you from the ground and they cage your feet. So it's so important that your toe, even having like a big shoe that's not actually touching your foot at all, it's still a confinement. The toes really need to feel that they can extend indefinitely, infinitely. And they mustn't be afraid to. So the problem with having caged feet all the time is that when you do actually uncage them, they don't really know what to do. And they're a bit fearful, a bit tender. So when I first came to Israel, people would always laugh at my English feet, as I was grimacing with each stone I was standing on. It's like Ty and her friends, they can walk everywhere. They walk over the sharp rocks on the beach, barefoot. So that sort of sensitivity that we have to things underfoot is completely the wrong sort of sensitivity. It's the sensitivity that makes you pull away from the world, pull away from pain, pull away from the pain of connection. So we want a sensitivity that is always reaching out, always curious, and just soft, just touching things softly. So we don't get hurt because we're soft, not because we're frightened and we'd never go out. So just feel those fingers. Ooh. And you can just feel, that sort of reflexology, where you treat the whole body from the hand or from the foot. So the whole body is contained like an image in the hand. So by exercising the hands, you're actually affecting the whole body. You can feel it. So ooh, something's happening down here and in the spine. Okay. So let's just bring the feet up a bit. You don't need to be macho all the time. Let's just bring the hands down. So just feel that rain. It's raining. You're standing in the rain. Yeah, and you've been working hard, yeah? So just imagine if it was raining and you were getting wet, yeah, what would someone else that was looking at you see? They'd see the rain dripping off your fingers, but they'd also see a steam rising from you because you're hot and you've been working hard. So that's the image of this, me being pulled down by this sort of viscous rain that's tugging at me, and my own body just emitting this real light vapor that's just rising upwards. Let's bring the hands here just to sort of, it's amazing what touch does. And just feel the head just wanting to sort of just sway very gently. And what that is doing is just producing a very slight weight transfer from foot to foot, like 5% of your weight is just moving. Okay, great. So let's leave it there.